in the bitter winter of early 1916, as the Battle of Verdun erupted into one of the costliest struggles in human history, the French army's survival depended on a constant stream of artillery ammunition. Every day, thousands of 75mm shells were pushed forward along narrow, frozen roads threading through the Meuse sector. The crucial supply route to the front, frozen solid near Clermont-en-Argonne, stretched silently into the oppressive winter gloom. The struggle began long before the disappearance. The French High Command had issued an emergency order. All ammunition convoys were to travel en vitesse, at maximum sustainable speed, to keep the guns at Verdun firing non-stop. Barely visible through the driving sleet, the heavily laden convoy pulled slowly out of the muddy depot, their journey illuminated only by faint headlamps and the intermittent flashes of distant gunfire. The cold blurred the final line of ink as the heavily helmeted officer rapidly signed the required document. Orchestrating the supply chain revealed the true complexity of the campaign, an interdependent network of rail and road stretching relentlessly toward the front lines. Against the biting cold and fading light, he frantically recorded every critical detail into the fragile ledger before the moment was lost forever. As the cold dawn broke over the stone farmhouse, a gendarme pressed the frightened civilian woman for information that the thick ground fog seemed determined to conceal. The French military police leave no inch of the frozen embankment unsearched, systematically sweeping the pristine terrain with sticks and sharp bayonets. The absence of evidence disturbed French command. Normally, even a destroyed convoy left signs: shredded metal, burned crates, torn uniforms. But here, the landscape was untouched. A French logistics captain wrote in his report, "It is as if they never passed this way, yet we know they must have." Complicating matters further, weather reports confirmed that the region experienced freezing rain that night, potentially erasing tracks. But total erasure? That remained difficult to accept. The first major reveal came when investigators reviewed route orders and discovered that two sets of instructions existed for Convoy 17B, an official version and a second version signed by an adjutant who later insisted he had no memory of altering the document. The second version included a minor detour near the Bois de Fay, but no driver logs indicated the convoy ever took it. Whether this was clerical error or intentional misdirection became an early point of speculation. Behind the sterile lines of the WWI supply graph lies the chaotic reality of broken carts and trench mud. This case stands out precisely because it contradicts the patterns of wartime error. As the search widened, officers began exploring new questions. Could the convoy have been ambushed by German patrols operating south of the Argonne? Could it have turned onto an unmarked forest road? Or did it experience mechanical failure, forcing the men to scatter? None of these possibilities aligned cleanly with the evidence, or the lack of it. The British Liaison Office summarized the mystery bluntly. "We have roads, orders, and departure. We do not have arrival, wreckage, or answers." The heavy safe accepted the file marked Unresolved Operational Loss. The truth was now permanently locked away from the light. The focus settled on the dossiers, Convoy 17B and Convoy 22D. These twin files held the full measure of the impending dread. Under the glare of harsh electric lights, senior French and British officers hold a strained meeting inside the fortified Joint Logistics Command bunker, maps and dossiers covering the table. The discrepancies in the transport ledger betrayed the clerk's weary efforts to conceal the truth from the investigation at the desolate roadside post. The challenge was immediate. Wartime logistics, especially in the Meuse sector, operated on a fragile balance of discipline and improvisation. Roads shifted daily under shell fire, bridges collapsed, detours became mandatory with little notice. But the officers leading the inquiry, Captain Louis Duroc of the French Service Automobile and Major Robert Hensley of the British Army Service Corps, were seasoned enough to recognize routine chaos from true irregularity. What concerned them was that the disappearance occurred on a relatively quiet night behind the lines, free from artillery harassment. It should have been a straightforward delivery. Interviews began with the soldiers stationed at the Clermont checkpoint. Most recalled signing the convoy through shortly after 2,300 hours in 2 groups of 3 trucks. But their descriptions varied. One clerk insisted the trucks carried tarpaulin covers. Another said the vehicles were exposed. A territorial infantryman remembered a British corporal giving instructions in French, a detail that conflicted with known liaison assignments. Even the number of personnel aboard the vehicles fluctuated across testimonies. The inconsistency was not unusual. Night, fatigue, and stress distorted memory, but the extent of it troubled investigators. Meanwhile, civilians from 2 nearby hamlets provided equally puzzling accounts. A farmer's wife recalled hearing engines sometime after midnight, a low rumble moving quickly, but she saw no lights, no silhouettes, no men shouting, nothing to confirm vehicles had truly passed. An elderly woodcutter insisted he watched a column of shadows glide past the edge of his property, yet admitted he might have mistaken the sound for returning ambulances. And crucially, both households independently mentioned that the noise abruptly faded near a bend in the road known locally as the Chemin des Trois Bornes. To the officers, this suggested the convoy slowed or diverted. But why? For historical context, the region was a labyrinth of forest roads, logging paths, and fire breaks carved long before the war. Maps were imprecise, and many routes were unnamed. Even so, proper military convoys rarely took such roads unless directed. Captain Duroc later wrote in his notebook, "The forest holds many paths, but none should have held our trucks." His investigation team scoured these trails on horseback and on foot. They expected to find wheel ruts, spilled cargo, even the faintest imprint of tire tread. Instead, melting snow revealed only natural debris and footprints from their own search parties. The first significant reveal came from a clerk's ledger found at the checkpoint office. It listed Convoy 17B's entry, but no exit signature to confirm it passed the next station northeast toward the Meuse. This gap was alarming. It meant the convoy might never have traveled beyond Clermont at all. Yet drivers at the depot had sworn they departed as scheduled. A British dispatch rider added another detail. He believed he saw dimmed tail lamps ahead of him earlier that night, but lost them in the fog. His unit diary entry read, "Lights disappeared as if swallowed by the weather." The phrasing would later be cited repeatedly in archival discussions of the case. As the inquiry deepened, investigators considered the possibility of enemy infiltration. German Stoßtruppen units had been observed operating south of the Argonne, probing for weak points in Allied lines. But captured German communications from this period reference no ambushes on convoys, and German intelligence records after the war likewise contain no mention of seized French ammunition matching the missing load. Major Hensley summarized the issue succinctly. If the Germans had taken those trucks, they would not have kept silent about it. Modern reflection suggests another angle. The overburdened transport network may have inadvertently contributed to the confusion. Hundreds of trucks passed through the region each night during the Verdun crisis. A clerical error, misheard order, or mistaken route could have redirected the vehicles without anyone noticing. But even this logical explanation struggles against the total absence of physical evidence. Trucks stuck in mud or abandoned due to mechanical failure would have left wreckage or cargo traces. None were found. The inquiry closed its second week with more questions than answers. The officers had retraced 17B's intended path, interrogated every witness, and scoured the surrounding forests. The conclusion remained the same. The convoy vanished somewhere between Claremont and Argonne and the forward depots, in a sector where disappearance should have been nearly impossible. As Captain Duroc wrote in his final preliminary report, "We have accounted for every road. We have accounted for every witness. We have not accounted for the convoy." What investigators did not yet know was that a second artillery convoy would soon disappear along a similar route, this time leaving behind a few scattered clues that suggested something far more deliberate might be occurring behind the French lines. And with that second disappearance, the mystery deepened into something that the French High Command could no longer dismiss as wartime confusion. By early March 1916, the disappearance of Convoy 17B had begun to fade into the background noise of the colossal struggle at Verdun. But only 3 weeks later, the French High Command received a troubling report. A second artillery convoy, Convoy 22F, had vanished. This time, the disappearance occurred near the dense forest of Hesse, a region already feared by drivers for its narrow passages, unstable ground, and the eerie silence that settled between sporadic German bombardments. Unlike the first case, however, investigators now had a handful of clues, and those clues immediately challenged the most obvious explanations. The crisis began on the evening of March 15th. Convoy 22F, consisting of 5 Berliet CBA trucks, loaded with 155mm shells, departed from the supply hub at Trielcourt. The operation was overseen by Lieutenant Henri Revaux, a respected officer with a reputation for precision. His drivers were a mix of veterans and new recruits, accompanied by a small detachment of British reconnaissance motorcyclists assigned to assist with night navigation. Their route, designated Route 4C, cut dangerously close to the forest of Hesse, but had been used successfully the night before. It was considered challenging, but manageable. The human struggle was evident from the start. The roads were coated in mud from early spring rains, and the trucks frequently fishtailed on steep gradients. Drivers had to coax their engines through sections where a single mistake could send a vehicle tumbling into ravines. One private later said in his diary, "The forest felt wrong, as though the trees were watching." No one spoke. We only listened to the engines, to the wind, and to the creaking of branches above us. Lieutenant Revaux himself radioed a brief message at 21:40 hours. Slower progress than expected. Visibility poor. Continuing as ordered. It was the last transmission ever received. When Convoy 22F failed to arrive at the forward ammunition park near Les Soisemes, French command immediately dispatched reconnaissance patrols from the British 2nd Army Corps, experienced riders capable of navigating dark forest roads. What they found after 36 hours of searching shocked them. Near a clearing at the forest's edge lay several half-buried ration tins, a damaged entrenching tool, and a leather map case soaked from rain. The case bore the initials HR, presumably Lieutenant Revaux, but there were no tire tracks leading deeper into the forest, no splintered wood, no signs of struggle, and most ominously, no bodies. The discovery forced investigators to reconsider their assumptions. If the convoy had been ambushed, there should have been evidence of gunfire, footprints, or discarded equipment. Yet the items found appeared simply dropped, not torn apart, not burned, not scattered by force. The forest floor had been softened by rainfall, meaning tracks should have been relatively easy to detect. Instead, the mud revealed only the imprint of the patrol horses and the investigators' own boots. It was as though the convoy had evaporated before reaching the forest interior. To understand the significance of this, it is essential to consider the operational context. The forest of Hesse, located west of Verdun, had long been known for its treacherous terrain. During the 1914 retreat, several French units were briefly lost within its boundaries, and by 1916, maps of the area remained patchy and inconsistent. War diaries from artillery regiments describe vanishing roads, where paths split unexpectedly or ended in thickets impossible for vehicles to pass. But even such environmental hazards seem insufficient to account for the complete disappearance of 5 heavy trucks. A revealing moment came when Lieutenant Revaux's last known orders were reconstructed. Investigators discovered that a secondary routing note, attached to his folder but unsigned, directed him to skirt the northern edge of the forest using an older logging track. This track did exist, but no drivers from the convoy had reported using it before. Worse, when investigators attempted to follow it, they found the road partially collapsed from recent flooding. Several segments were impassable, even for lighter vehicles. Had the convoy attempted to follow that path, they would almost certainly have left traces: stuck axles, broken wood framing, or scattered cargo. Yet none were found. Some officers began to speculate about German infiltration units, special patrols known to operate aggressively near the Meuse. But once again, German archives and intelligence intercepts yielded nothing suggesting an ambush of this scale. A German after-action report from the same week even expressed frustration at the lack of opportunities to disrupt French supply lines due to the French army's heavy presence in the region. If German forces had disabled or captured an entire convoy, they would have noted it. They did not. This led investigators toward a more troubling possibility: internal miscommunication or sabotage. The conflicting routes, the altered documents in the Revaux file, and the unexplained appearance of British involvement in convoy instructions raised uncomfortable questions. MI1C, Britain's wartime intelligence bureau, quietly reviewed coded messages in the sector, but found only one cryptic French note referencing irregular guidance near Hesse. The origin of that message was never identified. Modern historians reflect on the disappearance of Convoy 22F as one of the most perplexing non-combat losses recorded by French logistics in 1916. The forest, unforgiving as it was, could conceal many things, but heavy trucks laden with artillery shells were not easily hidden. Yet somehow they were. The senior officers, slumped and defeated, faced the bitter reality that the joint investigation had reached an agonizing dead end. 2 critical losses, miles from any known engagement. The silence on the map speaks to a threat operating where we least expected it. And as the spring fighting intensified, whispers of sabotage, espionage, or internal confusion spread through the ranks, setting the stage for a far deeper inquiry that would expose fractures within the French Supply Command itself. By April 1916, the disappearance of 2 artillery convoys, first 17B near Clermont-en-Argonne, then 22F in the forest of Hesse, forced the French High Command to abandon the notion of coincidence. Verdun's demand for ammunition was growing by the day, and the unexplained loss of dozens of tons of shells could no longer be buried beneath wartime chaos. A joint investigative detachment, composed of officers from the French 2nd Bureau and British MI1C, was dispatched to the Meuse sector. Their mission was no longer routine inquiry. This was an intelligence operation. And it began with a carefully mapped sweep of the region where Convoy 22F had vanished. The struggle facing the investigators was immense. Wartime France was a labyrinth of overlapping authorities, artillery parks, supply depots, territorial battalions, road engineers, liaison officers, and civilian contractors. Each kept their own records, often incomplete or contradictory. In the sector west of Verdun, traffic could swell to several thousand vehicles a day, ranging from horse wagons to motorized trucks. It was precisely in this vast logistical churn that both convoys had disappeared, behind friendly lines, on familiar roads. That alone made the mystery intolerable. To uncover the truth, investigators deployed reconnaissance patrols from the British 2nd Army Corps. These were hardened riders accustomed to navigating by moonlight, using the faintest track impressions to reconstruct movements. Their first task was to search the perimeter of the forest of Hesse, hoping the items left behind, Lieutenant Ravo's map case, the abandoned rations, the entrenching tool, formed part of a trail. For several days, the patrols worked in staggered shifts, advancing deeper into the woods than previous search parties. But aside from naturally fallen branches and the scars of earlier battles, they found nothing that could be traced to the missing trucks. Their journals describe the terrain vividly. "The forest breathes differently," wrote Sergeant Alfred Cooper. "Sound dies quickly. It is damp, heavy, cold even in daylight. A truck would have thundered in this quiet. We found no such echoes." His words reflected a growing realization. The convoy had not merely detoured into the forest. It had either been diverted before reaching it, or had vanished somewhere along the forest's perimeter, on a route so heavily traveled that the absence of evidence was itself suspicious. This insight led to the inquiry's first major reveal. While examining secondary road networks, Captain Jules Morel of the 2nd Bureau discovered a partially concealed surface track branching from Route 4C. Rain had turned the forest track into a scarred ribbon of earth. A solitary boot print was the only sign of anyone who passed this way. When investigators followed the track to its end, expecting to find a clearing, they instead found collapsed earth and uprooted trees, evidence of a landslide triggered by recent storms. But beneath the soil lay no metal fragments, no cargo crates, no bodies. Had the convoy passed that way, there would have been unmistakable structural remains. This absence of debris deepened the mystery. If the convoy had avoided the forest and avoided the washed-out track, where had it gone? Clues soon emerged in an unexpected form, fragmented orders from the sector headquarters. A clerk's ledger contained route instructions for Convoy 22F that differed from those in Lieutenant Ravo's personal folder. The official copy directed him west around the forest. The alternate version, unsigned, pointed him north. The discrepancy mirrored what had been found with the first convoy. Two conflicting routes, one of which could not be attributed to any officer with authority to issue it. Such conflicts might have been dismissed as clerical chaos were it not for the frequency with which they aligned with the disappearances. British MI1C noted that both sets of falsified documents redirected convoys away from major roads and into sparsely monitored sectors. The investigators now began to suspect deliberate manipulation, though whether by foreign agents, rogue elements, or internal incompetence remained unclear. A further complication arose when an engineer company stationed near Les Suems reported hearing distant explosions around the time Convoy 22F should have passed. Initially, the sounds were attributed to German shelling, but artillery logs revealed no corresponding bombardments. The noises were never definitively linked to the missing convoy, yet the timing fueled speculation that the trucks may have met disaster in some hidden ravine or collapsed trench network, areas where conventional patrols rarely ventured. Still, reconnaissance teams sent to investigate found no signs of disturbance, no scorched earth, no scattered casing fragments, no engine parts. The deeper investigators probed, the more questions surfaced. Why did two convoys traveling on different nights received contradictory routes? Why did both disappear in sectors where enemy activity was minimal? And why, in a war defined by destruction, was there no physical evidence of a loss that should have left unmistakable scars on the terrain? Modern historians point to the complexity of logistics during Verdun. Communication lines were overwhelmed, paperwork overload led to errors, maps were outdated, roads changed daily. But even acknowledging these factors, the total disappearance of two convoys without trace is statistically extraordinary. Something, human error, misdirection, or deliberate interference, interrupted their movements in a manner still unexplained a century later. As April drew to a close, investigators presented their findings to the French High Command. No confirmed route, no definite ambush, no wreckage, and no enemy involvement. What remained was a puzzle with missing pieces and a pattern that defied easy answers. And soon, rumors spread through the depots and artillery parks, whispers of sabotage, internal betrayal, or a hidden network diverting material for unknown purposes. Whatever the truth, the joint inquiry had only just begun. The next phase would take investigators deeper into transport logs, personnel records, and the testimonies of surviving drivers, revealing inconsistencies that would push the mystery into even darker territory. By May 1916, the Verdun sector had become a vast machine of movement, columns of trucks grinding through mud, artillery thundering day and night, and the endless stream of ambulances carrying the wounded toward the rear. Yet, beneath this constant motion, a quieter crisis was unfolding. Two artillery convoys had vanished without explanation, leaving French command increasingly uneasy. The official inquiries had stalled, rumors had spread, and now, with no battlefield evidence to guide them, the investigators turned to the realm of human testimony, driver logs, duty rosters, and personal statements. What they uncovered was a web of inconsistencies that suggested something deeper than simple navigational error. The struggle began with the most basic question: who exactly had been assigned to each convoy? Personnel rosters from the depots at Bar-le-Duc, Triaucourt, and Sewilly did not align. Some drivers listed on the manifests for Convoy 17B were later found assigned to unrelated units. Others who appeared in the official logs insisted they were never part of the mission. One corporal, interviewed by British MI-1C, claimed he had signed the departure sheet as a formality, despite having been hospitalized at the time. His confusion was attributed to exhaustion, but the contradiction raised the eyebrows of both British and French investigators. Surviving drivers from nearby convoys painted an equally muddled picture. A veteran mechanic named François Lehan described seeing a British motorcyclist speaking privately with a French adjutant near the loading yard on the morning Convoy 22F departed, a detail not supported by liaison schedules. Another driver recalled receiving orders from a lieutenant I'd never seen before, only to discover later that no such officer existed in the unit. These testimonies were not definitive, but they shared one pattern: unexplained personnel movements clustered around the days the convoys disappeared. The next insight came from transportation logs. The French Second Bureau began cross-checking departure times for convoys in March and April, comparing them against weather reports and artillery demands. Here they discovered two alarming facts. First, the logs for Convoy 17B had been altered. Ink smudges, overwritten numbers, and inconsistent time notations suggested retroactive edits. Second, Convoy 22F's departure time had been recorded twice, once in the main ledger at 1820 hours, and again in a supplementary log at 1905 hours, with no explanation for the discrepancy. One investigator privately noted, either two clerks made the same mistake or someone wanted confusion. Even more concerning were the gaps in the supply chain. Several crates of 75mm and 155mm shells, intended for the Verdun front, were noted as in transit, but never signed in at their destination depots. The amounts were small enough to be overshadowed by the larger losses on the battlefield, but significant enough to warrant scrutiny. Could the missing convoys have been redirected deliberately? If so, to whom? MI1C examined the possibility of internal sabotage. French counterintelligence had recently uncovered a small German espionage ring operating near Chalon-sur-Marne, disguised as civilian railway workers. Though no evidence linked them directly to the convoys, their presence demonstrated that infiltration was not impossible. Yet the absence of enemy claims remained a powerful counterargument. German communiques from March and April 1916 boasted frequently of captured equipment, but never of truckloads of French artillery shells. Another layer emerged when investigators reviewed the command structure overseeing the region's logistics. Overworked adjutants were issuing handwritten orders under severe time pressure. Several staff officers admitted that during peak Verdun traffic, orders were sometimes drafted verbally and transcribed later from memory. It was entirely plausible that clerical chaos contributed to the conflicting route documents. But even the investigators who leaned toward this explanation struggled with one question: how could clerical chaos erase entire convoys without leaving a physical trace? A revealing moment came when an internal memo from General Pétain's staff surfaced. The memo criticized the frequent redirection of ammunition convoys without proper authorization, warning that improvised route changes may result in misplacement or loss. Though the warning had been written before the disappearances, it now seemed ominously prescient. Had well-meaning junior officers tried to solve traffic bottlenecks by improvising routes and inadvertently sent the convoys into danger? Some modern historians consider this the most likely explanation. During the Verdun crisis, the pressure to keep supplies moving was relentless. Inexperienced officers, fearful of reprimand for delays, may have issued unauthorized detours, then hastily altered paperwork after realizing the error. Yet this theory fails to explain why the missing convoys left no wreckage or abandoned vehicles behind. By late May, the investigation reached its most unsettling crossroads. The testimonies grew more contradictory. One former driver claimed he heard a distant blast in the direction of Hesse, while another insisted the roads were quiet that night. A French captain argued convincingly that no truck could disappear without locals hearing something, yet civilians remembered nothing. The closer investigators looked, the more their findings dissolved into ambiguity. What remained was a troubling portrait of a logistics system under extraordinary strain: exhausted clerks, overworked officers, conflicting orders, and the constant threat of enemy action. Within such an environment, truth became fluid and memory unreliable. The investigators were forced to accept an uncomfortable reality. They might never reconstruct the exact movements of the missing convoys. But as the inquiry wound down, one final clue surfaced: an overlooked intelligence note referencing unusual activity near an abandoned quarry between Clermont and the Meuse. It was a small detail, easily dismissed. Yet, for the investigators, it offered the first tangible lead in weeks. And following that lead would bring them closer to understanding the possible fate of the vanished convoys, though not to a conclusion anyone found satisfying. The summer of 1916 brought no relief to the French army. Verdun continued to bleed supplies, men, and time at a catastrophic rate. Yet, beneath the roar of artillery and the chaos of the front, the investigation into the vanished convoys pressed on. It had become more than a logistical anomaly. It was now a historical burden. 2 convoys were missing, dozens of men unaccounted for, and no battlefield evidence had emerged. As June approached, investigators shifted their focus to overlooked terrain, forgotten roads, and obscure references buried in wartime correspondence. It was during this exhaustive phase that a small, nearly dismissed clue, a note about unusual activity near an abandoned quarry, began to reshape their understanding. The quarry lay several kilometers east of Clermont-en-Argonne, hidden behind thick overgrowth and partially filled with rainwater. Before the war, it had supplied stone for local roadwork, but by 1916, it was little more than a scar in the earth. A French engineer company had passed near it in April, reporting faint echoes of machinery and distant metallic impacts. At the time, these sounds were attributed to the constant background of artillery preparations, but now investigators saw them differently. If a convoy had veered off its intended route, whether by error or by falsified orders, the quarry could have been a resting point, a hide, or even a place where disaster struck. When the joint French-British investigative team arrived at the site, they found little at first: collapsed stone walls, rusting tools, and stagnant pools clouded by weeks of spring rain. But deeper within the quarry's recesses, partially concealed by soil and brush, they uncovered a small collection of artifacts: a shattered headlamp lens, a broken leather strap from a military satchel, and a rusted metal bracket consistent with the frame of a French Berlier truck. None of it confirmed the fate of an entire convoy, but it was the first trace of material evidence found since the disappearances began. The discovery renewed hope. Yet the struggle did not end there. The quarry floor had shifted significantly since March, due to repeated shell vibrations and natural erosion. Portions of the ground had collapsed into deeper pits. Engineers lowered ropes and lanterns, descending into narrow cavities where rock and mud formed dangerous overhangs. They found no bodies, no crates, no twisted remains of multiple vehicles, none of the signs that would indicate an entire convoy had plunged into the quarry. Still, investigators could not rule out the possibility that a single vehicle, separated from the group, had met its end here. If so, why had no one reported a missing truck independent of the convoy loss? The next reveal emerged not from the quarry itself, but from military archives. A war diary belonging to the 63rd Infantry Regiment, stationed near the Meuse line, contained an overlooked entry dated March 15th. The writer noted unusual truck movements near dusk, vehicles traveling without lamps, direction unclear. The entry was vague and non-committal, but its timing corresponded precisely with Convoy 22F's disappearance. The regiment had been positioned near a series of winding roads that connected both convoys' operational routes. If the trucks traveled without lamps, against regulations, what compelled them? Fear of enemy aircraft? A misunderstood order? Or something else? Another piece of evidence came from a post-war memoir written by a French liaison driver, Adrien Le Goff, who claimed that in early 1917 he encountered a British officer speaking quietly about the convoys that were redirected. Le Gouff's memoir was discounted by some historians for its dramatic flair, yet his mention of classified directives echoed the very frustrations investigators faced at the time: missing documents, contradictory maps, and unexplained personnel movements. Though Le Gouff provided no proof, the implication was unsettling: that someone may have intentionally altered routes to conceal shortages, bypass congested roads, or serve personal agendas. Modern analysts reviewing this period note the extraordinary pressure placed on French logistics during Verdun. Commanders were desperate to keep ammunition flowing. In such chaos, minor clerical mistakes could escalate into fatal misdirection. A single altered order, misplaced under piles of correspondence, might have sent a convoy into an unguarded sector, where a wrong turn into forest terrain or a washed-out road led to catastrophe. But again, the absence of wreckage defies this explanation. By late June 1916, the official inquiry concluded with a sober summary. No conclusive evidence of enemy action, no confirmed mechanical failure, no reliable witness accounts of disaster. 2 convoys lost without trace. It was a verdict as unsatisfying then as it is today. In the decades after the war, historians revisited the case with fresh eyes. Occasional discoveries rekindled interest: a rusted wheel hub unearthed near a forgotten mule track, a fragment of military stenciling found in a drainage ditch, a half-buried artillery limber identified through corrosion analysis. Yet none of these finds could be definitively linked to Convoy 17B or 22F. The archival trail, too, remained incomplete: pages missing from ledgers, ink blurred by water damage, and testimonies colored by the passage of time. The lesson of the vanished French artillery convoys is not a tale of espionage or conspiracy, but of wartime fragility. It exposes how easily truth can dissolve amid chaos, how rapidly records can contradict one another, and how the fog of war extends far beyond the battlefield. The mystery endures, not because it was engineered, but because it was allowed to disappear, absorbed into the noise of one of history's most devastating conflicts. And so the story closes, not with revelation, but with reflection. Somewhere along the ravaged roads of the Meuse sector, in the forests and ravines between Clermont and Verdun, the remains of those 2 convoys still lie hidden, or were destroyed so completely that no evidence survived. Their fate remains an unsolved chapter of the First World War, a reminder that even in an age of mass mobilization and meticulous record-keeping, entire movements of men and machines could vanish without a trace. A century later, the unanswered questions linger. And perhaps that lingering, more than any lost truck or missing shell, is the final legacy of the vanished French artillery convoys.